Hey, welcome back to Bob's Two-Car Garage. Stick around, I'm going to show you how to make floating shelves. They're quite the rage these days. Hi, my name is Bob and I love my two-car garage. And I bought this at a specialty plywood place, hardwood place. It's in the area where I live. Kind of expensive, but this is supposed to hold 90 pounds, which is a lot. And I have a 8-foot long shelf that I'm gonna make, which means if I use 2 of these, I can hold 180 pounds, which it means I could stand up there. So I gotta decide what kind of hardware you're gonna use. This is the more expensive route. There are some other options. This right here is one of my favorite ways to do a floating shelf. I just made a big box. And then on the wall, I put some strips of plywood, and that box just fits onto the plywood. This works really well, especially if you have a corner like that, where you have something to hold it up on this end, because I could make this one nice and deep. If you're going to make a really deep shelf, this won't work because it's just too much leverage on the front side. Something like this is another option, just a little pipe sticking out from a pipe flange mounted on the wall. So this is a lot cheaper and probably just as strong. I actually had a cabinet maker friend of mine. He would just screw a bolt into the wall and then cut the bolt off, and then the head of the bolt off, and then he would use that to mount his shelf on. I think it's kind of a funky way to do it, but it does work. It's got some problems because you got to get those bolts right in there nice and straight. They will bend around quite a bit, so it does work. Now, I've also seen people make wood frames to hang their shelves from, and that is an option, but they're not as strong as the metal brackets that you can buy. It is important to make that decision about the hardware before you start making your shelving. Now, to make the shelf itself, I'm using 3/4 inch plain sliced white oak plywood, and I'm going to sandwich it together. So we're going to end up with about a 2-inch thick shelf. Now, I could have used 1/2 inch plywood to make these shelves with, but at 3/4 inch gives me a little more to nail to when I put on that front edge. So I went with 3/4 inch. It's heavier, but it is a little more forgiving when you start to put on your front edge. The total thickness of the shelf is only going to be 2 inches. These 2 pieces of plywood sandwiched together are going to be 1.5 inches. This is 3/4 inch. So if you do the math, I don't have enough room to get this little pipe inside the 2 pieces of plywood. So I either got to drill a hole long ways into the plywood, which I don't think that's a very good way, or I got to think of something else. So the something else that I thought of was I'm going to take a router and I'm going to groove some dados into one of the sides or one of the faces of one of these pieces on the inside, and that way it'll give me some room for these brackets to slide inside the shelf. Now, I made this little contraption a while back for cutting dados for making bookshelves, but so it doesn't fit the router that I have, but that's okay because I want kind of a fat dado anyway. I'm going to wiggle it back and forth and take a couple passes at this. I got a 3/4 inch straight bit in the bottom of my router with a 1/2 inch shank. So I had to put a 1/2 inch chuck in my router. Now I'm going to start putting some grooves in here. Watch it. It works great. We actually ended up grooving both sides of both of the inside faces of the shelf, and that way our hardware will be centered better in the middle of the shelf. And then we're going to I cut some 1/2 inch spacers here that we're going to spread out along the inside, and that's going to give us our 2-inch thickness that we want, because we got 1.5 inches with the plywood, 1/2 inch here, all is up to 2 inches. We're going to glue and staple these here. And then on the other side, we're going to use some 18 gauge nails to put the whole thing together. Nice big wood sandwich. I'm going to make sure I'm using the right size nails because I really don't want to go through the face of this thing. That way the edges will be nice and even. All right, so now I'm going to take my matching side. I'm going to put some glue on each of these strips. And I'm going to use my 18 gauge pin nailer here and some nails that obviously don't go all the way through. And I'm going to tack it together. And these little screws are not, or these little nails are not going to show that much. So I think I'm good with that. I'm not sure that these two edges are lined up with each other perfectly, and we're going to put an edge on this, so they need to be perfect. So I'm going to take them as one piece, run it through the table saw, trim just a little bit, like a 1/16 of an inch off of each edge to make it perfect. Our shelf is a little bit long because we want it to be 8 feet, and right now, for some weird reason, I got a piece of plywood that is 96.5 inches long, which I've never heard of that before. Maybe it's a metric thing, but anyhow, I'm going to cut 2 inches or an inch off of each end so that when we're all done, we'll have an even 96-inch long shelf. I'm going to cut this on our cutoff saw. Now, because the hardware that I use sticks out from the wall a little more than 1/4 of an inch, we had to rabbet the back side of that shelf on the table saw. All right, so we're going to try it out. We've got our groove cut here, and look at that. That is a thing of beauty. All right, so got my shelf all detailed out and ready to go. All I got to do is add an edge. So I cut a 2-inch, ripped a 2-inch piece of oak, and this is white oak, by the way. And then gonna glue and nail that to the edge, miter their corners, and then it's ready for sanding and finishing. All right, so we gave our shelf here a good sanding. We started off with our random orbital sander and actually used some 80 grit sandpaper to get a bunch of it off of the top of this edge because it was a little wider than the shelf. It went down to some 120 and then some 150, and then we finished it off with an old school just vibrating sander to get it nice and smooth. Also, a little trick on the sanding is we wetted the whole thing down just a little bit and then let it dry. Kind of raises the grain of the wood and helps it to sand out a little nicer and nice and evenly. Also helps you see where you might have left any glue or anything like that. So little wash first, let it dry, sand it. Now we're going to put an edge on it with my router, and I've got just a little bit of a 45-degree router bit that I'm going to run around the edge just to break it a little bit. All right, we wanted to do this a little bit differently because we want a little more modern look on this edge. So instead of using a big fat 3/4 inch piece on the edge and just nailing it on and then mitering it, which looks good, but we want to do something a little bit different here. So we rabbited out our piece so that it's only a 3/8 of an inch showing on the edge. And we're going to set it in there like that and nail it down. So we got just a little more modern look on this particular shelf. Alright, so here we go. Some pin nails that are hardly going to show at all. Beautiful. We'll let that dry, sand it off, shape the edge just a little bit, and we're ready for finishing. I'm happy. Okay, so we are mounting our hardware for holding up our shelves, and they have metal steel studs in here, so it's kind of hard to find them, but we found two that are really good and solid. So we had to drill in there, leveled it all up with our nice big level, and so we're checking out both sides right here, and it looks really good. Put one screw in there. We actually had to drill a hole in our bracket in a place where it didn't have holes because we're tied into the way we constructed our shelves. So anyhow, this will still swing. So we're gonna level this out and then swing it up to where it needs to be and start drilling holes along here. We're gonna get two of these into a nice steel stud. The rest of them will just use drywall anchors. We'll drill some big holes for drywall anchors. It says on the package that you don't have to drill holes, but I've never had a whole lot of success with these drywall anchors without drilling holes. I really like these white drywall anchors, these plastic ones. They seem to be pretty good, but it seems like they're not all created equal. So these ones say made in the USA. I kind of like that. Of course, if you're in like New Zealand or something, you could buy them from New Zealand too, but I like these. Yeah, so much for made in the USA. There we go. Oh yeah. That is good and strong. You could dance on that. Okay, we got our brackets all installed. We're going to slide that shelf in place. It's going to look great. We got the right side up? I think so. Yep, we do. Beautiful. Looking good. She didn't like this. I don't know what she didn't like. It all looks good to me. White oak, white oak. Everybody wants white oak. And to make sure that this shelf just doesn't fall off of there, in case we have one of those California earthquakes or something, we're gonna run a bead across here. This is clear, so it'll squish out on the top, but when it dries, you won't even see it. And that'll be enough to hold this in place. Well, that's the way we did it. Floating shelves. I want to leave you today with this proverb that says, a man skilled in his work will stand before kings. So, whatever you do your very best. People are going to notice. Don't forget to like and subscribe.